As adults, we're all just middle schoolers walking around.
Like literally, just look at social media, right? It's such a big part of like our society. But when I started looking at it that way, I realized it's because we have so many adults who are walking around afraid, and so many adults who are walking around guarded. And because like that's how I was as a person. I mean, I felt like if I didn't have this role I was playing, I believed so deeply, if I'm not helping people, then I'm not worth anything. Right. And so that pushed me to push myself to the point of exhaustion. I mean, I had a seizure when I was teaching and was back in the classroom like within a month because I was so afraid of like letting things fall apart and blah blah blah. I had to be there for the kids and I had to hold space for them. But I think with middle school, what I've also seen is character, like raw character. And that's how I view that with kids, where it's like I'm a huge fan of the X-Men, like huge fan, not the movies as much, but the comics. And I use it to talk to kids about their character strengths because at that age, a lot of their strengths are coming out, but they're very much not developed and they're not defined. And so that's why you have things like the class clowns who have humor, right, or communication skills. They're misusing them or they're coming out in ways that are getting them in trouble, or the kids who are empathetic, like the kids who are involved in everybody's drama and trying to take care of everyone, or the kids who are telling everybody what to do like all the time, like the leadership skills are kind of coming out. And when they were given a space to articulate them and develop them, they had more power and more control. I've also seen that when learning is safe, right, when learning is not about getting good grades to be valued, right, it's more about what do I know now that I didn't know before? It's more about expansion, which is growth. And that's what I really care about. That's what I really care about for kids. If a kid has a D and they go to a C, that's growth and hard work and effort, right? But because it's not an A, a lot of times those kids don't recognize it. And so and in middle school, they're just growing rapidly. They're growing mentally, they're growing emotionally, they're growing physically. And my dream, I was going to say my goal, but my dream really is to help kids take care of themselves while they're growing, right? So not to be mean to themselves, to practice self-compassion, to practice forgiveness, to practice, self-inquiry, to practice self-love, right? Because that growing part is how they're going to figure out who they are in the world, right? And it's so important that they have these moments where they struggle, because this is how you figure out who you are. But what I'm seeing middle school is that it's more about suffering, that these kids are just unhappy and don't know where to turn and have no one to talk to except for their friends who are also unhappy and don't know how to process things. And when we give them space to really articulate and understand, and then tools to take care of themselves in it's amazing to see the transformation that kids can have. And I think the best way that I can describe this is I had a situation at the school where the art teacher quit and they needed a new teacher, but the situation was really bad. The art teacher had caused a lot of harm to the kids. The kids had caused a lot of harm to the art teacher. They had caused harm to the room. They had caused harm to each other. So when I took the position over, like kids were purposely being kicked out of that class because it was like that miserable. But these were my babies. Like I knew them. They were in my other class. So I was like, no, they just need some love. And I got in there and I didn't realize how much harm had been caused.
Like in the environment.
Yeah, just in general, it felt like weird.
Same kids, different space.
Like they were in my class regularly, but then because there was 2 teachers in my class and I left that class to take over the art position. So it's not like I was a new teacher. They'd known me for 2 years, right? My boss was like, please, you're the only one that has like a real relationship with them. Please save these kids because this space is really struggling. And when I went in there, the first thing we thought about was like, what harm had been done. So I opened up a circle space. We talked about rules about like how to show up in this space, how to be honest and open. And we started thinking about what harm had been caused in the room. And the first thing the kids jumped to was what the teacher had done to them. And they went around the circle and then they owned it and they talked about it. And it was pretty emotional. And then it became about other teachers. It was just like, here's harm that we feel as kids in general. Then they were just talking about that. And then suddenly they were talking about harm they had done to each other. And then suddenly they were talking about harm they had done to themselves. And then they asked for that class 2 more times. Like we came back in and I was like, we can start the next step, or do y'all want to come back to circle? And they're like, circle. And we did it 3 times. Like no one forced them to do it. They just wanted to talk about and understand like why they had been doing the things that they were doing, right? For them to say I destroyed the property because I felt like the teacher didn't respect us, right? And I was mad. That's a huge learning to have. And it was just such a powerful moment. They got to tear the room down. They got to do like designs, and they all got to vote on which design was the best for the new class. And they put the room back together and they cleaned the tables and stuff.
That's so powerful.
It was so, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. It was so restorative. And I just saw that if I came from a place of love, if I came from a place of like no judgment, right? Like, let's just be authentic and let's talk about it. When I could own that teacher had caused them harm and also hold them accountable for their own harm that they caused, right? Then it became about healing. And so I think about that experience a lot because they didn't have a lot of the words. They didn't have a lot of the language. They didn't know how to connect the feeling with, like the shame and regret and guilt. Like some of the kids wrote the teacher apology letters at the end of it. No one asked them to, but they had just reflected on it. And so when I think about how kids feel about themselves, when I have kids reflect, when I talk to the kids who I have relationships with, they articulate their thoughts out loud. And so many of them are really just tough. They're really hard on themselves, whether they're getting good grades or not, right? Or even in between, whether they feel seen, whether they don't, whether they feel like the love in their life is conditional or it's unconditional. I just saw that they needed a space to talk about it. And I think that that's been the greatest gift that I've been able to offer any kid that I've worked with, is just space to be, and then to be like held as who you are. And then you can think about these deeper, bigger things. And it sounds dramatic to some people, but I'll be real with you. I look at the world in general, it's like we have so many people moving from a place of fear, right? Where it's like, you can't tell me this, I can't do this, you can't tell me what to do, blah blah blah, or like these people will do this to me. There's so much fear. And I also see that there's so much disconnect from personal self. I talk to so many adults who struggle with the same things that my kids struggle with. And I think that moving the way that we're moving in this planet in terms of sustainability and in terms of growing as a society, we need more people who are moving from a place of humanity versus a place of fear. But right now, especially with our education system, everything is set up to push kids to continue that same track of like, check off the boxes. If I do this, then I'll be happy, versus starting off with, before you even think about who you are as a friend, before you even think about who you are as like a change maker in this world, who are you to yourself? And I talk a lot to kids about bullying, because bullying is a big thing, but I talk a lot to kids about self-bullying, right? Because that's who I was. I was my biggest bully. I didn't have the external bullies, and I'm so grateful. I didn't have that because I knew how to be charming and fun, and I had friends and safety around me. But when I got into my room at the end of the night, it was all, you know what I mean? I was beating the crap out of myself. I was so hard on myself for years. And I had to learn how to take that, like Jen says, to take that inner asshole and turn it into my best friend, because that inner asshole is trying to protect me. That inner asshole is trying to serve this purpose for me, but it's doing it from a fear-based approach. It's doing it from don't put yourself out there, don't risk yourself, don't, let yourself be in love, right? Because these things will hurt you. And then I realized that's kind of like my inner child. That's like the inner me trying to protect me. And I had to then sit with that child and offer them love and let them know that they're safe, right? And that I don't need things that limit me. I need things that help me expand and help me grow. And I try to do that same work with kids to help them understand that you are responsible for your growth and expansion in this world. And sometimes you have to start with the safety on the inside, because these outside sources will not give us that. They won't give us the space, especially like my Black and brown boys, especially my queer kids. Like, you have to create inner safety to hold space for the tough things, but we don't have a lot of that opportunity. So that's why I want to be a public figure, is because you don't know what these parents are telling these kids. You don't know how much pressure they're putting on them, or how conditional their love may feel, or what these teachers are saying, or what their friends are saying. But if there's kids who are alone, who are struggling and can say, I know where I can go to learn or feel better or choose these things that feel good for me. I want to go there. And then that's who I want to be for kids.